As American troops prepare to withdraw from Syria, Turkey is threatening to send its forces into Kurdish-held positions. One America's Jack Posobiec sat down with former CIA officer Brad Johnson to discuss.
We're happy to welcome back to One American News Brad Johnson, former CIA officer and president of the Americans for Intelligence Reform. Thank you so much for being on with us again today.
Thank you. Great to be with you again.
So we're talking now about the U.S. potentially withdrawing troops from Syria and what the response is going to be, not only for the Kurds in the north, but also our ally, so to speak, in Turkey with Erdogan there, our NATO member ally, and his potential look at the Kurds. What are you hearing on the ground, Brad?
Well, this is getting interesting now. Publicly, this really came to the forefront following the 14 December conversation that President Trump had with President Erdogan of Turkey. And out of that, they agreed that what the United States was going to do is pull out, and then subsequent to that, you had President Trump's announcement that we were going to pull out of Syria. Erdogan has said publicly a number of times that his understanding of that conversation was that the United States leaves, it gathers back all of the weapons that were issued to the Kurds, turns over the bases, breaks contact with some of those Kurdish groups and leaves, and then the Turks will then move in and eradicate terrorism. They also include the Kurdish groups under the definition of terrorist, and very adamantly so. That's kind of where we find ourselves today. Now, a couple of very, very interesting developments. One, the Kurds see the writing on the wall. They understand that if it's confrontation with the Turks, that it's a fight to the death, and that's that. Now, the Turks have denied this in press, but I find that to be deeply unrealistic. So the Kurds, what they've started to do is pull back from some of these areas, going to more defensible areas since they won't have the full U.S. backing there and air support. And what they've done is invited the Syrian government troops, in other words, Assad's troops with Iranian and Russian backing, to backfill behind them as they pull back, which is extraordinarily interesting and something that would not have occurred otherwise. And so what they're trying to do is create a buffer between themselves and the Turkish army, because they don't.
So now, if the Turkish army is trying to come into the Kurdish areas, now and Syrian forces, that's regular army forces.
That's correct.
Now you've got a state-on-state potential conflict. You're making it an actual conflict between the two neighbors,
yes,
which could spill over into the international community and everything else.
Erdogan is being very adamant about this, and he's saying things that are, definitely rattling the swords, talking about going in without any prior notice, or going into these areas that have been previously controlled by the Kurds and the Americans without any previous notice or warning to anyone, and making comments of that nature.
What other options are there, does the president have at his disposal to sort of make sure that Turkey follows suit and doesn't go into the Kurdish areas and is sort of a team player in all of this?
The Turkish position has long been basically that we need them and they don't particularly need us. So they've always had the position that they hold the cards, and there's very little that the United States and the rest of the West can do. The Kurds are a major central issue to the Turks, and it would be very easy to start negotiations off by saying, if you're not a good partner and ally, there's others in the area that would be, and certainly the Kurds would be. Now, that would be very inflammatory to the Turks, but it would be a negotiating point that the United States could throw out at any time and just say, well, perhaps we need to start visiting the idea of an independent Kurdistan. And the Kurds, of course, have long wanted that and pushed for it. So it would be something where you'd certainly have a receptive audience of the Kurds, who have proved themselves to be a very loyal ally, very helpful, and very willing to work with the United States.
Yeah, it would seem that there's also a number of economic options available, possible, making sure, obviously there's still going to be a U.S. military presence in the region, not only with our Air Force assets that we have inside Turkey, but also with the Sixth Fleet right there in the Mediterranean. So I think that when a lot of people hear this idea that ground troops are going to be pulling out, they think the U.S. is completely abandoning the entire region.
Yes, that's a very good point, and we're not. There's still definitely a military-to-military, very robust relationship between the U.S. military and the Turkish military. And that, again, exists at all levels and is part of that overall communication that takes place. And the Turkish military is extremely important within Turkish society, more so than the United States. They play a much larger role than the military does here in the United States.
Thanks so much again for being on with us, Brad.
All right, thank you so much.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe to One American News on YouTube. And call your cable provider and kindly demand that One American News is added to your lineup. Call and subscribe today.